Process innovation. What is it? Why is it important? And even more importantly, how do you incorporate process innovation in your day-to-day creative practice? Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Wendy Brightmill. I am an artist, I am a mentor, and I am an educator. And I also like to say that I am a process innovator. What exactly does that mean? Let's go ahead and unpack it. I actually obsess over process, and I love helping other artists find a process and a style that is all their own. So before we actually break down what is a process, I want to share with you a little bit more about my own creative journey and kind of how I came to the place that I'm at right now in my own creative practice and in my style. So growing up, I was encouraged all throughout my childhood to be creative. My mom was an artist. She was a seamstress and she was a DIYer extraordinaire. And she was always, we were always doing some sort of creative project around the house. So that's kind of how I grew up as a child. And my mom would put us in art classes. And in high school, I took a drawing course where we learned how to technically draw portraits. And basically what we would do was we would copy photographs. And I remember we used to look through magazines and look for models in order to copy them for this course. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this, right? But here's the deal. I never really considered myself an artist at this time, and I didn't actually enjoy the process of making these portraits. I'm gonna show you two of them right now, just so you can see what I'm talking about. So here is one. And so look, I mean, you would probably look at this and say, wow, she's really great at that, right? And, you know, here's another one. And this is 100% a skill that you can develop as an artist. You can draw, you can create something with this amount of form. And I will say that I think this is a skill that almost every artist should attempt and should develop, just so that you know how to create in this way. But back then, when I was taking these art classes, in my mind, there was only ever one way to create art, and that was this way. All I knew how to do was to copy a reference photo, an inspiration photo, and make it exactly like the photo. I didn't know that there was another way or many different ways to create art. This was the only process that I knew. And I will say that I didn't actually enjoy the process of making that. And so for me, I probably only made, I don't know, maybe 6 to 12 of those portraits, maybe more than that, maybe around 20 or something. But that's because to me, it wasn't about enjoying the process of making it. It didn't get me excited to create. It was only just to have the end product of making something like that. And I want to point that out because back then, I didn't have an understanding that there are so many different ways and so many different processes. And if you don't like one thing, one process, that doesn't mean that you're not a good artist, or that doesn't mean that you're, just a mediocre artist or whatever. It just means that you haven't found that thing that makes you come alive inside. And that's what I love helping artists figure out. So fast forward a few years, like 10 or something, and I actually was in a car accident and sustained a traumatic brain injury. And in my years of recovery, and when I say years, I mean years of recovery, going through depression, going through chronic pain, going through all of the difficult seasons of having a brain injury and trying to put your life back in order. If you've had one, you understand what that looks like. It can be extremely difficult. I had a different personality. My brain just didn't work the same way. I had difficulties with, remembering details. And this way of creating art probably would not have been possible. And so during this time, my mom gifted me a mixed media art book, and I started making mixed media art. And what happened was this thing came alive inside of me, and I found these other ways of creating art that wasn't, this one strict, it has to look like the photograph. And I was able to actually tap into different parts of my brain that I had never been able to explore before. I was more creative, and I discovered that there's different processes of making art. So this is where I actually want to talk about the different elements of art, because this is the purest example of form. Okay, this is a 3-dimensional drawing where I am taking a photograph and I am capturing the 3-dimensional capacity of something. That is form in its purest sense, okay? And some people, and this is really just the purest, the people out there who think that this is the only way to express art, or that it is the highest form of art. That a lot of times I find people who maybe don't have a background in art or an appreciation of art, they think that this is the best kind of art, right? And so I just want to mention that. But when I started playing with all of these other ways of making art, I actually found other aspects or other elements of art that really spoke more to me and the style that I most felt drawn to. And so what I think is really funny is that here I was painting or drawing these black and white or just graphite sketches with zero color. And to me, color is the number one driving element of art for me. I obsess over color. And so it makes sense to me that I didn't enjoy that, because color is the number one inspiration for all of my work. And so, of course, I didn't want to create because it was gray and boring to me. And so, like I said, there are 7 elements of art. There is line, shape, color, form, texture, value, and space. And I personally believe that your style can be made up of usually like 2 to 3. Some artists use all of them in almost equal capacities, and that's okay too. But personally, I believe that you tend to be more inspired by 2 to 3 in your own particular style. So my signature pieces, where I create all of these, mini, I don't know if you guys can see any right now, but if you go back and you watch my videos on how I make my crazy floral bouquet mini paintings, you will notice that the top 3 elements that I'm using in those paintings are color, texture, and shape. And there's not a lot of form. There's no like really big element where it looks 3-dimensional per se. It's more about the graphic flat shapes, right? And so maybe you enjoy using, I'm working with an artist right now who loves value, color, and line. And that's going to look so much more different than the work that I create. But I empower her to make that choice and to go deeper into building her skills in those 3 areas, because it's going to make her style more pronounced, and it's going to allow her to stand out more as an artist. So what I discovered is that you can mix up your process, right? You don't always have to start with the exact lines to create form. Because when I was creating these drawings that were the form pencil portraits, you had to start with the exact lines. Now, if you want like a whimsical, wonky style, you might start with lines, but your lines might be inaccurate, right? Or you might start with shape. When I went through my phase of creating digital illustration in my style, I was taking the subject matter. So let's say I was drawing a bear, and I would break down the bear, and the lines were not accurate, so it wasn't realistic at all. And I would break it down into the most simple of shapes. And so it was almost like I was drawing with shape. And so then I would scan it, put it into Digital Illustrator. And so the process of that was that I started with shape, and then maybe I also added color and texture to it. And so that's a totally different process. And when I create my crazy floral bouquets, I start with abstract shapes, and then I turn it into a still life abstract floral painting. So there's so many different processes, and depending on the elements of art that are your top ones, your process is going to change. So if you are more into realistic form and realism, you will want accurate line work underneath, which means that you need to become amazing at line work, or you need to use tools to help you get accurate, meaning you need to trace in some way or have some way to get the exact lines from a photograph, right? And you need to have an inspiration photo to create something that looks realistic and like it has form. Or you need to have actual still life or a subject right in front of you to then draw. So there's so many different ways to go about it, right? And so going back to this artist that I'm working with, she likes to start with watercolor, develop a lot of value in her color, and just play with abstract watercolor movement and some shape work on her paper, and then she'll let that layer dry and come back with really detailed lines on top of it. So it's a totally different style, which means there's a totally different process. And what's so exciting is that when you get to the place where you have a better understanding of all of the elements of art, you can sort of pick and choose. And let's say I want to do a painting right now that's maybe more of an impressionistic painting, kind of like maybe like a Monet. So what I would start with for a painting like that is I would get my line work on my paper or on my canvas, and then I'm going to break it down into the shapes that I see, developing a little bit of form through blending, but also keeping my brush strokes very individual, right? Because that is a Monet painting. And I am going to play with light and dark, with values, but also keeping like these minuscule little tiny shapes showing in different places, right? He was the master of having this dance between value and shape that almost like created something dimensional. But when you get really close up to it, you can see all of these little tiny little brush strokes of shape and color, and it makes it very dynamic and moving and fluid, right? And so each style asks for a different process. And so I recommend, taking your elements of art and really looking at how can I create something that is innovative in my process. So when you actually learn how to innovate and mix up the order in which you are creating, it's going to be what is going to allow you to develop your own style, to the point where people will see a painting and they will go, oh my gosh, that is a Wendy Brightville painting. Or, whatever it is, whoever you are, they're going to recognize it just by seeing a photograph. And this is from really taking that time to go deeper into each one of your favorite elements of art. So why am I so passionate about helping artists find and develop their own process and their own style? And this is because I spent so long really struggling in my sense of identity in the art that I was making. I would see a painting that I liked and I would study it and I would copy it exactly. And there's nothing wrong with this in the beginning stages. It's a normal part of figuring out who you are and what you like and how to paint, and it's a normal process. But what ends up happening when you do that is that there might be a few things that really feel like you, that you love, but there might be some other elements to it that you don't really like. You might just like the color and the way that the artist develops value. You might like the texture that they use, but not the colors. Okay, so there's ways that you can see someone else's work, evaluate it, decide, oh, you know what? I really like the way that they used line and shape. I don't like the color palette that they used, or I'm going to add some texture to this type of painting. And in that way, you pick and choose those things from artists that you really love, and then you leave the rest. And that's the exciting part, is that it empowers you to find those things that feel most like you. And I want to say, and just let you know, that one of the things that happened for me when I really started to hone in on my own style was that I found this new satisfaction in creating. And I would also say that I probably didn't love most of the art that I was making for the majority of the time. But when I was able to tap into these things that felt most like me as an artist, it was like something came alive inside of me and I couldn't stop creating. And that's what it's supposed to be when you're making art that is within a style that you love. It makes it so that you can repeat the process over and over again, and it doesn't get boring. And yes, I do understand, there are times when I like to switch it up and I like to do different things. And so I give myself the permission to go do something different, go do something new, put a different twist on it. Maybe I will dive more into value like I am right now. And maybe I will play with messy brush strokes for a while. Or maybe I will create something that has a lot more space in it, more negative space to give it more breathing room. And so what's cool about it is that you can continue to mix up and innovate your process as you need to go. And when you do that, you have so much more confidence to make those choices from a better sense of, this is who I am and this is what I'm wanting to express through my work. So I want to tell you a quick story about something that happened to me. And this is when I received the best compliment that I've ever gotten on my art. And it was this younger gal that I was talking to. And as I was talking to her, I had gotten to know her over the period of a few months. Nothing like, big, but I had seen her on a regular basis and sort of gotten to know her. And one day she knew I was an artist and she asked me, she said, "Can I see some of your art?" And I was like, "Oh, of course." So I just pulled up my Instagram account and I started showing it to her. And she stopped and she said, "Oh, it's you, but on a canvas." And so even in her, minimal experience with me as a person, she was able to see that my paintings exemplify who I am as a person. And I love that. And I love it when I can help other artists get to that place in their own work where they are able to express this inner thing of who they are onto a canvas. So that is hands down the best compliment I've ever gotten. So after you are at this place where you have discovered who you are as an artist, there literally is nothing else like that feeling that you get when you are in a creative flow, making art that you absolutely love. And I will say something here, because I know a lot of artists talk about wanting to sell more of their art. And I will say that when you are creating art from a very authentic place and from a place where you feel like it is fully you, that it's so much easier to sell it. And I think something that happens is that people know. People can look at your art and they can know like that it's coming from the truest place of who you are and your personality and what you have to offer the world. And so I think that when you are able to create art that feels like the fullest expression of you, that it attracts people. And not only that, it attracts the right people to your work. Yes, you still need to market your art and talk about, the meaning behind your art, but there is this quality to it where it just resonates with people. And it's going to bring the right buyers at the right time. And so I just want to encourage you in that as well, and this is what I had to do, because when I was making art, when I was making these digital forest animals, I like to, talk about them all the time. I was actually trying to break into the art licensing world, and I had zero success. I think I got one piece of art licensed ever, and I was, working my butt off. But what I discovered is that I was actually making art that I thought other people wanted from me. And I wasn't making art just that felt like it was me, I don't know, there was just something about it that always felt like I was being an imposter. I 100% think that when I stopped making art for other people and started making it again for me, just for me, then that's when I actually started to sell my art. So people know, they just know almost on a cellular level. So the more that you can play around with your process and with all of these different elements of art, finding that combination that is unique to you. And it takes time too. I want to encourage you in that. You're not going to get it overnight. So if you have not taken my art style blueprint quiz, I highly recommend it. I've had around 700 of you from YouTube have gone and taken this quiz already, which is blowing my mind, but it will rank and put them in order for you. So it'll tell you your top one, and then it'll tell you all the percentages. Don't worry about it too much, but maybe just look at which ones are coming out on top for you. And those are the ones that I encourage you to build your skills in. So if line is at the top for you, then you really need to be focused on drawing line work. And if, texture is high for you, you need to play with all sorts of different textures. And there's so many ways to develop that in your work. If shape is important for you, you can, really look at maybe like pattern design or Illustrator work, or what I do with my palette knife. That's a great way to incorporate shape into your art. Brush strokes even, and just painting out shapes, right? And so when you take the quiz, you can really just look at, okay, how can I build the skills in my top elements of art? And especially when you make that choice to go deeper into each one of your top ones, then you can kind of start piecing the puzzle pieces together and go, I could, paint a painting with this type of shape, adding in texture and, maybe line work as well, So you can play with your process and make it unique to you and to the way that you are choosing to express your style. So let me know in the comments what your top elements of art are, or those things that you are the most drawn to. And I think I'm even going to start doing a series on each individual element of art and different exercises that you can do to get better at each one. And I promise you, when you focus in on developing your skills deeper in one particular area, you are going to see such huge improvement. And it's all about consistency and showing up consistently to your art practice in order to get better. And then, I think a lot of times as artists, we get so inspired and we're all over the board that we don't see a lot of growth over time because we want to do it all, which is fine. And I totally get that. But start looking for those things that really get you excited and go deeper into series that help you develop those areas a little bit more consistently, and you will start to see a style emerging. And it really does just take practice. So if you want to take the quiz, it's in the caption, and you can get your results emailed to you. And I just want to say thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions at all about this and the process. And maybe I'll also do some videos sharing some different processes. If that's what you want to see, also let me know.